Welcome to Word Englishes. And if you're new here, it's really nice to have you. Today, I want to invite you to think about something that feels very ordinary, something we probably see every day but rarely question. When you look at Indonesian beauty advertisements, especially from brands like Wardah or Emina, you will often notice patterns like makeup with skincare benefit, vitamin rich, or shield up the game. Now, if we pause for a moment, these phrases don't actually communicate anything that Indonesian cannot express. We could easily say, make up dengan manfaat perawatan kulit, or kaya vitamin. The meaning is still there, but somehow the feeling is different. The English version feels more convincing, more scientific, even more premium. So, the question I want to explore today is not just why English is used, but why it feels more powerful. What is about English that changes our perceptions, and what does this tell us about language, identity, and power in Indonesia today? So, from a sociolinguistics perspective, this is not just about language choice. It's about how language carries meaning beyond words. To understand this, we can start with the concept of word Englishes. Traditionally, English has been treated as standardized language owned by native speakers, right? Especially in countries like US or UK. But that view has shifted. Scholars now argue that English is pluricentric language, meaning it exists in multiple forms around the world, each shaped by local context. In this sense, English in Indonesia is not simply borrowed or incorrect. It is being reshaped and redefined by Indonesian users. We can actually see this very clearly in everyday speech. For example, you might hear someone say something like, sunscreen yang lumayan bagus untuk protect dari sinar UV, teksturnya mudah meresap. At first glance, this might look like a mixed languages, but if we look closer, it actually very structured. In Indonesian parts, yang lumayan bagus and mudah meresap describe experience and evaluations. They tell us how the product feels and performs. Meanwhile, the English part, protect dari sinar UV, introduces a sense of technical or scientific authority. This is where the concept of translanguaging becomes useful. Translanguaging suggests that speakers, they don't separate languages neatly in their minds. Instead, they draw from a single repertoire of linguistic resources. So, English and Indonesian are not competing here. They are working together. English is used where authority or technicality is needed, while Indonesian is used for clarity and relatability. So rather than saying this wrong, we can see it as highly functional way of communications, right? What's interesting is that this everyday pattern is then amplified in advertising. Taking, for example, the phrase vitamin rich plus melembabkan. This might look simple, but it's actually doing something quite complex. The phrase vitamin rich is not translated into Indonesian, even though it easily could be. And the reason is that English here carries a certain symbolic weight. It signals science, formulations, and global standards. Meanwhile, melembabkan communicates something very direct and tangible. It tells you what the product does to your skin. So here, we see a kind of division of labor between languages. English operates at the level of abstractions and authority, while Indonesian operates at the level of experience and accessibility. This is not random, it's a pattern way of constructing meaning. A more layered example is the slogan "Shield up the game, hadang UV and blue light." If we unpack this, we can see that each part serves a different function. The English phrase like "shield up the game" is quite abstract. It doesn't directly describe the product. Instead, it creates a sense of empowerment as if skincare is part of modern active lifestyle. Then, the Indonesian phrase like "hadang UV and blue light" explains the functions more clearly. It grounds the message, and interestingly, terms like UV and blue light remain in English because they are part of global scientific vocabulary that people are already familiar with. So, what we see here is not just mixing but layering. English creates aspirations, Indonesian ensures understanding, and scientific English anchors authority. It's actually a very sophisticated design of meaning, right? Another interesting example is like Wardah beauty moves you, bersama lebih bermakna. This one is slightly different because it operates at the level of ideology. The English phrase beauty moves you emphasizes personal transformation. It's about you as an individual. It reflects global ideas of self-improvement and empowerment, but then bersama lebih bermakna. This shifts the message toward togetherness and community, which are very important values in Indonesian culture. So here, English and Indonesian are not just doing different communicative jobs, right? They are expressing different worldviews. English leans toward individual aspirations, while Indonesian emphasizes collective meaning. And the ads combines both. These Indonesian brands are not just copying global language, they are negotiating it. However, while this shows creativity, we also need to look at the power behind it. This is where the concept of a symbolic capital introduced by Bordeaux becomes important. Because language doesn't just communicate, it carries value. In many contexts, English is associated with prestige, education, and global access. So when English is used in advertisement, it doesn't just describe the product, it increases the perceived value. This leads to a critical question. Why does English feel more scientific and more credible than Indonesian? The answer is not linguistic. It's historical and social. English is associated with global knowledge system, technology, and economic power. Because of that, we tend to trust it more, even when the information is the same. This creates like a subtle hierarchy where English is seen as superior than Indonesian as secondary. Indonesian is often used to support or explain what English leads of the message. Over time, this can shape how people think about language and knowledge, right? So, at this point, some might argue that English is simply necessary in a globalized world, and that's true to some extent. English helps Indonesian brands connect with international markets and audience, but the issue is not whether we should use English, it's how we use it. If English is always positioned as more valuable, then we risk in reinforcing inequality. So, from my perspective, the solution is not to reject English but to use it critically. This means recognizing its role as a global resources but also being aware of the hierarchies it can create. One important concept here is intelligibility, which refers to how easily message can be understood. Many Indonesian ads actually manage this balance quite well. They use English for headlines and Indonesian for explanations, ensuring that the message is both attractive and clear. At the deeper level, we can also see this as a form of agency. Indonesian brands are not just adopting English, they are reshaping it. They integrate it with local values, cultural identity, and linguistic practices. This shows that English is not simply dominating, it is being negotiated. So, to conclude, the use of English in Indonesian beauty advertisements is not just a stylistic choice. It reflects the dynamic of word Englishes, the flexibility of translanguaging, and the influence of global power structures. English can function as a powerful resource for communications and creativity, but it can also reinforce inequality if used without awareness, right? So the next time you see phrases like vitamin rich or shit out the game, I invite you to pause and think about what they represent. Because language is never just about words, it's about identity, power, and how we position ourselves in a global world. And maybe the most important question is not whether we should use English, but rather whether we can use it without losing the value of our own language. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to text me in the comment sections below here. And don't forget to click subscribe for more topics. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.